Hello, everyone, and welcome to a product update for Umbraco Heartcore. It's been a hot minute since Codegarden, where a lot of new features were introduced and talked about in Hardcore land, and we thought it was about time that we gave you a proper update on it, and also a little demo of some of the larger new features that have been added. With me today to show off the new Umbraco Heartcore features, I have a couple of the developers from the Hardcore team. Would you like to introduce yourselves, Morten?
Yes, my name is Morten, head of cloud platform at Umbraco, and I'm here with my great colleague Rasmus.
Yeah, my name is Rasmus. I'm a developer at the Hardcore team at Umbraco.
Very nice. Thank you for joining me. We have a little agenda set up for the day, just to keep track of where we are on things. And we'll take a brief look at what has happened with Umbraco Heartcore since Codegarden. There's quite a few things that have been added to the headless service. Then we'll dive into a couple of the features a little more deeply with demos of GraphQL filtering and custom grid editors for Umbraco Heartcore. And then finally, we'll take a look at what's coming up in the not too distant future for Hardcore. But Morten, I think you are the right person to tell us the story over the last couple of months.
Yes, yeah. So since Codegarden, we have released custom grid editors, which we talked about at Codegarden, and this is one of the things that we'll dive deeper into. So I'll just jump on to the next one, which is two-factor authentication, which is now available in all of Umbraco Cloud, but for us, especially interesting with Hardcore, that you can enable two-factor authentication. So when you access the back office, you are prompted for a second factor. So that's pretty cool. Yeah. We have done a whole bunch of performance updates for both GraphQL and our REST API. And we have since shipped a redirects API, so something that we've heard from many users for a while now, that they would like to be able to have an API for redirects. So the redirects that you see in the back office in Hardcore, actually being able to retrieve those through an API. So we have that now, and we have that documented on our.umbraco.com under Hardcore and APIs, so you can see what you can get out of that API.
Yeah, and we'll add links to all of the documentation in the description for the video as well.
Yeah, cool. And then related to the redirects API, because using the redirects API is currently available when your REST API is served from our content delivery platform. So that's something that is standard now for all new Hardcore projects that are created. For some of the projects which have existed for longer, maybe for more than 6 months, I think now, some will need to be updated to run out of our content delivery platform. And that's something that we are doing gradually for customers. Like if they contact us and want access to the redirects API, then we'll update the REST API to be served from the platform, and then they'll have access to the redirects API. Apart from that, we are working on a schedule of getting all projects updated so everything is served from the content delivery platform. And this content delivery platform is what's currently powering our GraphQL API and both preview APIs, both for GraphQL but also for REST. And it's also what's powering webhooks actually. So that's something that will be standard for all Hardcore projects in the near future. It is for new ones, but there's some old projects or older projects that needs to be updated as well.
Yeah.
Then we've had a few different updates to GraphQL, and we'll dive into one around filtering, which we think is particularly interesting. So that will be the next and first demo. Then we've added Media Picker v3 to Hardcore, so you can use that as well. And that's one of the things that you can use within nested content. And speaking of nested content, one of feedback items that we've gotten is that people would like to use the tags property editor within nested content as well. The one that's available by default in Umbraco is not supported within nested content. So we've made an update and added a tags version 2 property editor to Heartcore, so you can actually add it in and use it in nested content. And then, and then also since Codegarden, we have started the work on version 3 of our REST API. So currently we're on version 2. Version 3 is what we talked about at Codegarden. That is where we are aligning with the open source version of Umbraco, where so version 12 of Umbraco will get a REST API as well. And this is where we are from the Heartcore team collaborating with the CMS team to bring that API to the open source version as well. And it will be aligned between the two, so the open API spec will be the same. The content or the JSON output from the API will be the same, so that you have some freedom and flexibility to move between the two. So whether you want to move from the open source CMS or regular Umbraco Cloud to Heartcore, or from Heartcore and the other way, you have the freedom to do so. So we are pretty excited about that.
Yeah, I guess it's also just easier to if you're jumping between projects, right? Because it's actually using the same conventions.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So you can actually pick it based off of what you want. So if you have a project where it makes sense to use a software as a service offering like Heartcore, then you can use that, and it's the same API as if you were running it on your own servers with the open source version. So yeah, that's pretty cool. As part of this, we've gotten a lot of community feedback. So we had 2 sessions during October and then beginning of November. Maybe both were in October, I can't actually remember. But we had 2 good sessions with community members and a bunch of Umbraco MVPs who gave feedback and input on the direction of the REST API. So kind of steering us in the right direction of or verifying, I would say, is more verifying that we're in the right direction for the REST API. So of course we had some ideas of where we wanted to go, and it was good to talk with the community about whether it was the right direction and the expectations of what's part of a version 1 of the REST API, for example. So something like authentication and authorization, what should be available, a preview API, does it need to be part of V1 or not? So a lot of those things has been decided on based off of input from the community.
Yeah, and I guess it's worth mentioning that we've launched a headless community team since Codegarden as well. I think in September, right? To kind of get a sounding board for some of the ideas, not only for Heartcore but headless in general for Umbraco, right? And they've been really helpful in this process.
Yeah, we actually had the first meeting November 1st. So we pushed it a bit because we wanted to have some more to say about the REST API as part of the community team meeting. But so we had it on November 1st, and I think it was a really good session. So it's myself and Lasse, the product owner from the CMS team, who was part of that, along with 10, 11 community members.
It's a big team.
Yeah, and there's some really good feedback from that as well, and we got to share the direction and thoughts on the future of headless, both in Umbraco and also in Heartcore. And then there's a lot of interesting stuff, and already look forward to the next one. Coming up with new ideas.
Yeah, and it's fantastic to see how much interest. I think it's one of the most popular community teams we've launched actually in terms of applications. There was a massive amount of interest for it, so good place to be for sure.
Yeah, definitely. It was also very difficult to pick out who should be part of it. We would have loved everyone to be part of it, but then it would be a gigantic team, which would have made it difficult.
Yeah, there'll be opportunities to join in the future.
Yes, and then
right? Well,
we talked about the alignment a little bit, and that's something that will be ongoing, both for the REST API, but also for the management API, which will be added to Umbraco 13. So I know that Rasmus has some conversations with the CMS team around that, and then we try and regularly get updates and see that we are heading in the right direction. We have some input and some learnings from Heartcore that we can hopefully benefit from in the CMS perspective, and then also align on that, so it will be the same API that will be used, whether you're using the open source version or Heartcore. But that's a future thing, because that's version 13.
Yeah.
So maybe
So
we should look at what's available now and jump into some GraphQL goodies.
Go for it.
Yeah, we have this first demo of filtering. So we added not too long ago support for filtering on complex types like content picker, media picker, or multi-node tree picker. And we have this small demo to showcase it, where we have a site which has a basic setup with some blog posts that have been written by different authors. So here you can see in the bottom, I've selected an author, which is called JJ Casper. And then if we go to the folder with all of the authors, we can see that there's a bunch of different ones here. And here it could be interesting to select, like for a specific author, what are the posts that they have written, or let's say specific or posts written by a specific author. So here we've prepared a query where we query for all posts that have been written by JJ Casper. And here you saw that JJ Casper was selected through a content picker. So using the name of the author, we can find the articles written by that author. So yeah, that's some of what you can do with complex filtering. There's probably a wealth
really
of different
nice
ways to filter, but this was a very basic example of how it can be achieved. Yeah.
Excellent. Very cool.
Yeah, and we can jump right to the next one, where Rasmus will show custom grid editors.
Yeah, probably the biggest feature we've launched in quite a while, and also a feature that really points to the future for Umbraco Heartcore. But I'll let you take it away.
Yeah, well, I mean, we can elaborate a little bit on why we started with custom grid editors, because I mean this is part of the journey towards custom property editors for the back office, where you can create more or less any editor, right? Where this is constrained to the grid, because we have quite a few customers on Heartcore which uses the grid, or who are interested in using the grid because they have editors who are familiar with it, but they also have a need to be able to create custom grid editors. And so we've been looking at ways that we can achieve this in Heartcore, and as we've always wanted to provide custom property editors as a whole, this was a good stepping stone for us, because it's a bit more constrained, so it's easier for us to get started and try and explore how we can enable the creation of custom grid editors in the back office. And I'm sure Rasmus will elaborate a lot more, but it's using web components and JavaScript and JSON and JSON schema and all the good stuff, which is probably also part of what will make up the new back office in version 13 to some extent, at least.
There's a bit of alignment there as well, and we could just say that part of the reason for doing this is also that you don't have the same access as you might be used to from a regular Umbraco installation to the code base. So this is a way of enabling writing custom codes and doing customizations in the back office, right? in what looks like a really, really cool way. But it'd be
Yeah,
great
exactly.
to see it, Rasmus.
Yeah.
Yes. Let's see. There we go. So, yes. So I've set up a document type with the grid editor added, and if we just quickly show the config here, so it has a single property called page content, which has the Umbraco Cloud headless grid layout editor added. It's the default setup, so there's nothing constrained. It allows all editors. So when we add our own, we can see that if we start by just going back and adding one of the default ones we have, take the headline, we can write, this is my headline, and save that as we usually will. And yeah, that is, if we go to the API, see, then we have the grid in the JSON output, and we can see the editor value we have added. There we have the value and the editor. Yeah, so that's what we have when we ship with it. So if we go to the settings sections, we have a new sections under templating called grid editors. You can see the ones we ship with. If we take the headline one, you can see it's built using web components. So a grid editor expects that you have a default export of something that implements the HTML element. And all you need to have on that is a get and set for value. So set is called by the editor when it loads. So it gives you, or the component, the value that's saved, and get when is used when the page is saved, so to get the value for your editor. And then you have multiple ways of rendering stuff. So in the headline one, we are using plain JavaScript, where we have a template that's added to or the inner HTML is set on the custom element to the template data, and we update the value directly on the text area when we load and save.
But this is actually the HTML and the JavaScript that you have in the same editor, you could say, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So everything is inside this one JavaScript. So both HTML and CSS and what is needed to render it. But let's see if we should try to create a custom grid editor from the bottom up. So when you create a new one, you get this template just to get you started with something. It's more or less the same as the text editor, just with a simple input button or input text field. But I think we should try something with some images instead. So let's start by finding a photo. That's the most important thing, right? It's having a good
the icon
photo for your editors. Yeah, so they can see it. Let's call it my image gallery, because we are doing a simple gallery. So if we start by pasting in, okay, if I do everything, then might have something showing up, or maybe not. Sometimes the preview, yeah, it's a little wonky, but because it's being rendered in an iframe, so it doesn't have full access to Umbraco, so it can be sometimes it doesn't work, sometimes it does, but it's more like just to help you out seeing how it will look instead of you having to save and going and adding it to the page each time. So
yeah, basically a live preview of whatever you're coding, right?
Yeah, exactly. So
nice.
In this example, we're using something called lit element. Lit element is a web component library that helps us with a bunch of stuff. For example, for our property, we have a value. All we need to do is specify a static properties with the value, and then lit knows in the background how to handle lit that. And then we have a render method where we return our HTML wrapped in a HTML helper they have. And that's all you have to do. You don't need to do the querying like we did before, which makes it a lot easier. It also makes it easier if we want to add some styling. So if we copy in some styling here, again, preview, there we go. What you have to do with lit element is export static styles that's wrapped by the CSS helper, and then you have your style sheet in there, and then lit knows how to render it. So just for fun, let's try to save it and go back to our page and insert it just to see how it looks over here. And you can see it looks the same, but currently nothing happens when we click the button. So we need to hook this up to a image picker or media picker. We can do this using a library we have that's called headless backoffice bridge. So the headless backoffice bridge is like a bridge or proxy where the interface is expected to be the same no matter version of the backoffice. So this is mainly because currently the backoffice built using AngularJS. In later version, as you heard before, it's going to use web components. So if you're building a custom editor today using AngularJS, then it wouldn't work when the backoffice is upgraded. So we have this custom or this library that wraps some pickers and have some helpers currently. So here we have the media picker, that's the one I'm importing from the library. So the media picker has one function called show that takes some different properties. So in this, because we want to select images, we are disabling folder select. We're saying we only want images. It has a details pop-up that allows you to enter alternate text and a caption. We want this to show, so the editors can add some context to the image they're picking. And then
are these properties standard for elements in Umbraco in general, or is it something that's specifically for the things that you're proxying?
So these ones are standard for the media picker in Umbraco.
Yeah.
So we are just proxying that for Umbraco, these fields.
Yeah. So if you're used to working with that, it should all be very familiar.
Yeah, it should. Some of the syntax might be a bit different, but it should be fairly similar. Yes, and then there's a submit. That's a callback with the items selected. Yes. So currently we just added the show picker that doesn't really do much. We need to add a listener to our button, right? So we can add a click event. Go this show picker. So this is the syntax with lit element.
And you actually got suggestions there when you started writing that out. So
it's
got a little bit of intelligence or whatever you want to call it.
Well, we can just take that. So the editor is actually based on the same editor that VS Code uses. So it has some intelligence in the background. So when we import the different libraries and stuff, it actually knows what's there. So if we can take that for the media picker, right? So it knows there's a media picker, and we have the show function, and you can see here it says, it takes. I guess that's not even the right one. So
that's awesome.
But yeah, there's some fallback there, right? So save this, and we go back to our page. Then we should, when we click Add Image, get an image picker, right?
Oh la la, very nice.
Then we can select an image, but again, nothing happens because we're not rendering the images in our editor. So let's quickly copy in some more code here. So yeah, so what we're doing, again, the preview is a bit wonky sometimes. Yes, so what I've added to the page now is like we look for the images. So we map the images with their own HTML again. So we're using another thing from the bridge library called UMBH image. The UMBH image is a helper or custom element that helps you with rendering images in the back office or in your custom editor. So it has a couple of options. Is it width and height of the image? It takes the UDI. So the UDI is what you're getting back when you're selecting an image by the media picker. The UDI is a combination of the type, so it will be media / the ID of the image, right? And then it also can take in a focal point. I think there's also for crop options if you're using the cropping options. But in this case, it uses the focal point. So if you change the focal point, it actually reflects it in the image without you needing to calculate the crop URLs or anything. So let's see if we save it again. We go back, refresh the page, and if we select an image and write a text just for fun. Like that, right? And then we have the image. Might not show the text here, but you can see it's added to the L text. And you can see for the query string, it's actually adding everything that needs to be cropped, and it puts in the focal point. So if we, I don't have edit in this one, but if we take another photo, we take the yes, and we move the focal point down here, and we add that. It moved a bit, but
yeah. Depends on the cropping.
Yeah.
How does the output look?
Yeah, that's the next thing I actually wanted to show. So currently, if we go and see the output, it's pretty horrible. You're getting it out as a string.
Wow.
But we can fix that. So if we go back, we have this JSON schema over here. The default is telling it to output it as a string. So that's why we're getting it as a string.
Makes sense.
But we can update it. So if we go back to our code and look what we actually have in our values. So our values, yeah. So our value is an array, right? That's also why what we specified up here, that we want it to be an array in lit element. So if we go in and change it, so change the type to an array, and then we specify that the items inside this array are objects. So this is using a standard JSON schema to describe the editor. So if we go back and save this, and I think we need to publish again for it to pick it up that we changed it. We can refresh, and now we actually have it outputted.
It's way nicer.
In a nicer way. Yeah. But there's still one problem,
really
right?
cool.
There's still one problem. So you can see the URL we're adding, that's still just showing the UDI. But that is something we also can change. So using the JSON schema, we can go in and add a properties array, and then we can say the URL property, we want it to be a string, and then we have some magic when you tell it it's a URI reference. then behind the scenes, we look at the data stored, and if it's a UDI, then we take it and convert it to the URL you actually, that's behind the item. So if we go in again now, there we go. You can see now we actually have the URL of the item. All this just by changing the output here in the JSON schema.
That's incredible. Very powerful stuff.
Yeah.
Maybe we should change the name to Magical JSON Schema.
Yes. So yeah, one last thing I want to talk about here is that you can see we are importing a very specific version of the back office bridge here. So there's a small problem doing this because if I import another version, given that we have these web components included, then we won't really know which version of the web component that's being included in the page, and the page might even break because multiple are trying to register on the same name. This also, if you want to upgrade this, is going to be a pain to have to go into all your all your editors and update the name or the URL, right? So we have a section here we call custom editors configuration. So in this area, we can add an alias. So see, I've added an alias called headless back office bridge, and that points to the same URL. So if I take this instead and put in here, then we can save. We can go back to our page, and everything works as before. There's no changes. And if I wanted to upgrade at some point to a newer version of the bridge, all I have to do is go in and edit the version here, and then we are running on a newer version. So, yeah.
Fantastic.
I think that was it.
That looks really great, Rasmus. Very nice.
Yeah.
Yes, and it's as you can see, it's a pretty complete feature and elaborate, I would say. That you can do so much from the back office, creating new grid editors. And yeah, I mean, we imagine that it will be kind of a similar experience with custom property editors as a whole. So whether you wanted to create your own editor for your special needs, like if you need opening hours, that you could create a property editor in the back office that looks and feels like something where you can just easily fill in your opening hours, so your editors can use that. So of course it's still early days, but you can hopefully imagine that a similar experience with using web components and so forth in regards to property editors.
And I can just say that it looks very similar to the work that is being done on the new back office as well, right? So again, we have a thing where it's really aligned, so there won't be too much context switching going from working on a CMS project to a hardcore project, right? So
yeah, exactly.
It looks really great.
Yeah, and the further the new back office comes along, we will integrate the stuff in here, so you can reuse the elements and align it more with how the new back office is. So it's going to be a very similar experience.
Yeah, you've had to done a lot of work here in order to make this work for hardcore for now, but in the future you can align it even more with the back office, the new back office. Yeah, nice.
Yeah.
Very nice.
Cool.
All right.
So that was.
Shall we take a look at the future?
Yeah, that was the demos. So we can kind of round off with a look at the future. Obviously, as I mentioned before, we started with the early stages of REST API version 3. So that's currently work in progress. So that will be one of the next big features that will drop in hardcore. For Umbraco, it will be part of version 12, which is out in June, I think, around Codegarden-ish. Hopefully we can have it out in hardcore before then, so you can actually try it out as well. And then we've talked a bunch about custom property editors. That's one of the next big things for us. We're currently working on some upgrades and updates in the background to better enable that. So beginning of hopefully early next year, we can start making drops around what will be possible. And then something that we have on the roadmap now is persisted GraphQL queries, something that we've wanted to do for a while. So instead of writing out your entire GraphQL query in JavaScript or whatever, they can be quite large. So instead of sending all of that across the wire, it would be nice if you could save it from the back office of Umbraco. So once you've tried it out, then save it, and then just add in your parameters and use it with a more friendly URL, so to say.
It's almost like creating an alias for your queries, right?
Yeah, and it will also allow you to lock down the query, so you can only use the one that's actually stored. So nobody is able to just try to explore your API, right?
Yeah, nice.
Yeah, and then we're looking at the webhooks version 3. So version 3, for us at least, since we are on version 2 now, we want to focus a bit more on security, since we have quite a lot of customers who want to be able to call an endpoint which is secure. And right now, there's not a real good way to do that, because you can only enter a query or enter a URL, and then only with query string parameters can you use that, or IP filtering. So we believe we can do a bit more in terms of security, so it's more integrated, and have different ways of authenticating against the endpoint that you use. And then hopefully in the same work, we can make webhooks a bit more flexible in terms of how it can be configured. But we'll have more to say about that at a later point in time. But that's what we're thinking about doing, at least for webhooks. And then we also, I mean, we do a lot behind the scenes. We're currently focusing on improving high availability, stability, and performance for all of the APIs. So we're expanding on what we do for high availability to ensure uptime for hardcore. We've had a few cases over the past year where there's been some outages, and because of that, we are focusing a lot more on this. And this is something that we want to improve, because we believe that it's, in order to be a really good service, it needs to be highly available and stable and performant all the time. So that's a large focus area for us to focus on. Behind the scenes also, we are expanding our test suite and release management for how we handle releases for hardcore. Whenever we do something, we need to ensure that we are not doing breaking changes in any way. So whether that's for the REST API or with GraphQL, so we need to ensure that before we actually release anything. So we have various things in place that helps us check that the endpoints that you use and expect to be in a certain way don't change. And then we're expanding that because we need to be a bit more full circle in terms of what we test and how we release it. In the past, we've been very focused on especially the GraphQL and REST APIs. But one of the things that we need to put a more emphasis on is the back office as well, and ensuring that you can always log in, always update, always publish content, and then get the expected output out of the APIs. So being a bit more full circle around the back office and the APIs in all of this.
And that is just a requirement when it is software as a service, right? It's not the users that are initializing the upgrades. It's something they should just expect to have the latest version always running, right? But that also means it puts some different requirements on how upgrades are handled in general.
Yeah,
right? So,
yeah, exactly. Yeah, because for some it's more about using webhooks to actually generate a static website, for example. And first when that webhook is actually calling your endpoint, it starts using the APIs. So if that first part doesn't work, or if something in that flow fails, then you would never get to use the APIs and actually publish your website. So therefore, it's very important that we have the full circle end-to-end experience of using it. So that's why we are putting a lot of emphasis on expanding our test suite, so we can catch if such things should happen. If there's a regression, we need to be very, very good at catching it before it goes out, and make sure that it doesn't go out. And then obviously, I mean, as Umbraco Cloud is expanding and opening up new regions, we've opened up one in the US, in the eastern part of the US. We're looking at also how we can make that work with Heartcore, and whether it should be which parts of Heartcore should be regional. I mean, we've always wanted the APIs to be globally available and performant, like in a CDN type fashion. But we also know that some would like to put some constraints on where that content is actually published to. So that's some of what we are exploring and hoping to get more feedback on. What are people's expectations of being able to use it in different regions, both from a back office perspective of creating content, but especially also from the perspective of publishing it and making it available either globally or regionally.
And I guess also where data is stored can also be a thing that people want more control over, right? There are some that have requirements in those areas as well.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean that has an effect on how we do high availability and where we push updates out to. Like, if we replicate across different regions, should that be constrained within Europe, for example? Should it be constrained within the US? So that's something that we are exploring and diving a bit more deeper into before we actually release it to the public. But yeah, so that's what's in store for the future of Heartcore.
Yeah, well, the last 6 months have been very exciting, and it certainly looks like the next 6 months are going to be as well. You've got your plates full.
Yes,
but it's all awesome stuff. So looking forward to seeing it in action, for sure.
Yeah, and then when we do the next update, there'll probably be a lot more things in the overview of stuff that's been released. But at least these are our thoughts for the near future, well, near to long term future.
Fantastic.
Yeah, and I guess with that, thank you for listening. Thank you for following along in this product update.
Yeah, and thank you for joining me and giving us a glimpse of some of the cool new features that you can try out today. If you go to try.umbraco.com/hardcore, you can get a free trial of Hardcore and try out what you saw here. Let's do this again in the not too distant future. So see you in the next one.
Yes, see you.
See you.
Bye.